Donkey Kong! Donkey Kong! Yeah! So here we are, an incident in time I had hoped we would never reach. It has been 10 years since the last Donkey Kong game. Wait a minute, I'm receiving intel that there is in fact a new Donkey Kong game dropping in the next few days. When will it end? I don't know. I mentioned in last year's Coping for Kong video that I didn't think there would be a new game in 2023 or 2024. I still stand by that for reasons I will soon get into. But I will say, if there were any year that we would get some solid, tangible information about the whereabouts of DK, I think it could be this year. Gonna keep it kind of low-key for this year's video, you know, talk about where the brand is at, some of the things that have happened to DK over the last year, and where we could be headed. For those of you who might be new here, this has become something of a yearly tradition for me, you know. I'm a big fan of Donkey Kong.
Well, no shit.
And this is all in good fun. I made sure to stock up on my copium supply, so if you hear about any shortages, then stay away from my house. Because I need it more than you. Hang on, gonna need a big rip for this one. Oh yeah! I'm still, perhaps naively, optimistic and confident that a new Donkey Kong game will grace us someday. I don't believe that the recognition this brand has been receiving is for nothing. The swell of rumors and reports of a canceled and restarted project only adds fuel to the fire. I believe them! And Nintendo is known to sit on finished projects for various lengths of time. But with that said, there have been some new concerns creeping up in my mind the last few months that I'm hoping are just nothing more than me being paranoid. Let me go ahead and paint a picture for you. So, for years now, I've been discussing rumors and reports on the DK brand and how Nintendo was seemingly gearing up to start a new building phase for this IP. After years of waiting, we are now in the middle of this building phase. 2023 was a big year for Donkey Kong, all things considered. It marked the release of the Mario movie, in which Donkey Kong had a big role and was a huge success. All because of Donkey Kong, of course. This alone may have been the widest net Nintendo could have cast to get DK in front of as many people as possible. We had the release of new merchandise in the form of Legos, too expensive for my budget, but also a new set of figures. Neat! Diddy and Funky made their grand return to the Mario Kart series, as well as the greatest Mario Kart course, DK Mountain. Hashtag double dash sweep. I don't make the rules, I just write them down and read them out loud. And looking ahead a bit, the first of the Donkey Kong Universal Parks will be opening in Japan in the next few months. So, on paper, all of these things are great. Donkey Kong is more relevant now than he had been in a long time, maybe even ever. But I'm sure some of you have noticed that there's been a common link between all of these various things. Donkey Kong is completely stapled to Mario's back right now, and has been for a while. All of the major Donkey Kong appearances are currently an extension of the Mario brand. This in itself is not inherently a bad thing. Mario and DK have always been closely linked, and after all, this is the building phase. By leveraging the popularity of the Mario series, it is putting Donkey Kong and the rest of the crew in front of as many eyes as possible. And this was the plan all along. I think a lot of us DK fans have taken this to hopefully mean that eventually Mario will kick DK out of the nest and let him spread his wings and fly off on his own. Lots of games and spin-offs for all. I'm becoming a little worried that this may not entirely end up being the case. Perhaps we've become a bit too intoxicated with the copium. After the release of whatever Donkey Kong game is next, I could imagine this newfound momentum hitting a bit of a crossroad. Down path A, we enter a new era of Donkey Kong prosperity, a combination of 2D and 3D games releasing every couple of years, lots of new merchandise, perhaps even the occasional spin-offs. You know, basically the ideal future for any Donkey Kong fan. But down the other path, something maybe not quite as ideal. I think it's worth discussing that this is Nintendo we're talking about, and it wouldn't be Nintendo if they didn't pull a Nintendo. Sometimes they just make decisions that only make sense to them. It's entirely possible that Donkey Kong could simply continue to exist and be nurtured as an extension of the Mario brand. You know, still receiving the occasional new game, but at the pace of something like a Yoshi game or a Wario game. So, not that often. Don't get me wrong, you know, this is still far from the worst case scenario. That would still put Donkey Kong in a much more favorable position than a lot of other Nintendo properties. It would just be kind of a shame to see all of this buildup not leading to anything substantial down the road. But this is also not a future that's hard to envision. Mostly because that's the current reality of the situation. Now, the flip side to this is that Donkey Kong is getting an exceptional amount of promotion across all of these various Mario things, like much more than your typical Mario side series. So for Nintendo to just put him in their pocket again and forget about him for another decade or so would be a huge waste, but also a very Nintendo move. I think what I find particularly strange about Nintendo's treatment of DK is that the games have always sold fairly well. So it's just kind of weird to me that they feel the need to position Mario and Donkey Kong this closely at all. I'd imagine that through Nintendo's typical means of marketing and promotion, that a new Donkey Kong game would sell well regardless of how much it's been propped up by Mario. Again, who knows why they do what they do, but that's all I'm gonna say on that for now. I'm really not trying to fearmonger or, you know, inject any doubt into the DK community. These are just thoughts that have been on my mind that I thought were at least worth bringing up. For now, let's focus on some exciting possibilities. So, unless Nintendo just so happens to have some surprises left in the chamber, DK will probably be a Switch 2 title. It would kind of be a bummer to see DK skip the Switch entirely. This would be the first time ever on a Nintendo home console that there hasn't been an original DK game, but at this stage of the Switch lifespan, you know, dropping DK on current hardware would really just hold it back. In terms of sales, I'm sure it could do just fine, but the hardware is just so outdated. With the Switch 2 right around the corner, it would just be a wasted opportunity to not have a graphically enhanced DK game ready to go for early in the next system's life. Dropping DK now on Switch would ensure that it will either look or feel dated in a matter of months when we start getting next-gen software. I think we can all agree that a Donkey Kong game on the same level graphically as something like God of War would be fucking incredible. Not that they'll necessarily go that far, but you get my point. There's nothing wrong with wanting fun gameplay combined with a graphically impressive experience. My dream scenario would be for DK to be a big graphical showcase for the Switch 2, echoing how Donkey Kong Country was to the Super Nintendo 30 years ago. Holy shit, I'm old. Don't know if that will happen though, you know, that's why it's a dream. Anyway, moving on, I think even the announcement of a Donkey Kong game is just going to be one hell of an experience to behold for us fans. When that happens, DK is going to be everywhere. Gaming news outlets, content creators, hello. We will all be talking about DK, and what a special time that will be. And I'll also add that if there were a time to begin keeping an eye out for that announcement, I'd say that we're probably at least nearing the end game here. All of the building blocks that we've been talking about for years now are in place. We're only missing the game at this point. However, even if the Switch 2 is revealed and released this year, I suspect we're still gonna be waiting until next year at the earliest for DK to release. I don't think there's any reality where Nintendo has gone 7 years without a new 3D Mario and a new console on the horizon, where Nintendo doesn't release a new 3D Mario as a launch title for said console. It's like when the neighbor's dog squats in the yard, I know he's gonna poop. An announcement for the next DK alongside the console doesn't seem as far-fetched. You know, it could be one of those early reveals to get people excited for games coming some months after the Switch 2 is released. Man, I'm gonna run out of copium if I keep talking like this. Gonna add a little more fuel to the fire and point out that the Donkey Kong website domain no longer directs you to the Tropical Freeze page. You are now directed to the My Nintendo Store page for our golden child. This doesn't guarantee that an announcement will happen soon, but it probably does mean that they're at least laying the groundwork for a new game page. Maybe. It has to be addressed. But let me try to put a positive spin on this. Even if DK is only allowed to live on Mario Life support from now on, it's still neat to see DK being pushed on the scale that it is. Theme parks, movie appearances, merchandise, rumors of a movie of his own. As I said earlier, this is still a better outcome than a lot of other Nintendo properties that people have been waiting on for even longer than us DK fans. I know it's not the dream scenario a lot of us are probably hoping for, but you know, silver linings and all that. Besides, you know, there still is a best case scenario where Donkey Kong is able to thrive as a series again in its own right. A more frequent trickle of games, 2D and 3D, possibly even the potential for spin-offs once again. The series hasn't really been healthy enough to justify spin-offs for a while, but, you know, it would be neat to see them again once we get there. And what a time to be alive that will be. Maybe. You know, it's kind of sad that if the current trickle of Donkey Kong games keeps up at its current pace, that I can reasonably guess the amount of Donkey Kong games that I will see for the rest of my life on one hand. Why does my brain work this way? Let's stay positive. You know, it's great that DK is being held up for all to see once again. Time will determine if it sticks. It's an exciting time, you know, we are witnessing the rise of a king. But you know how it is. If we don't get that Donkey Kong game this year, well then, you'll know where to find me. Thank you for tuning in to this year's edition of Coping for COG. I'll catch you guys next time.